And then obviously Peyton Sinclair is very different than RJ from It's a Wonderful Death. But they are both telling us first-person narratives from a teen point of view. And I've read a couple of your novels that the esteemed audience hasn't yet had the privilege of reading. And so I know that you tend to go first-person most of the time. What is it about first-person perspective that appeals to you, and what opportunities for storytelling does that allow?
For me, it's easier to write than third person, because when I write, I kind of see everything playing out in my head as a movie. And so I kind of want to see that from that character's point of view, and kind of walk around with blinders so I'm not seeing everything else. For this book in particular, it was really important because there were a lot of things going on behind the scene that, had the audience known that Peyton didn't know, it wouldn't have worked. There's a lot of secrets, and there's a lot of manipulation going on. And if the audience had been aware and Peyton hadn't, they would have just been like, "Oh, you poor soul." And so I didn't want that. The other thing is, when you're cooking, it's such a sensory experience. You've got sound, you've got taste, you've got smells, you're feeling stuff, you're cutting yourself, whatever. And I really wanted to bring the reader into that experience and hopefully they feel like they're surrounded by all of those senses being triggered through Peyton.
And then, of course, you've got a large cast as well. You've got, 7 other contestants. So how do you make sure that you distinguish between each of them, make sure that you establish them, create the competition for Peyton without detracting from your main story of Peyton and her journey?
That's a great question, because it is, to some degree, it's an ensemble cast. But she is the main storyteller. And as far as, you say there's 7 other people. In the original manuscript, before we had to cut it down, there were 10 characters that were involved in this process. There was an additional adult who was involved in this process, who got meshed into Caitlin. The judges were a bigger role in the story than they are in this version. And so the thing that I really wanted was to try to keep the voices, because they are very unique people. But they're, in the front of the book, it's talked about. This is a cast that was specifically chosen to meet kind of a diverse cast. And so it was a really thin line of writing a character who is of Indian descent and not crossing that line into using that character to try to say, "Ooh, look, see, diversity is cool." But really trying to get into that unique experience she might have had. One of the things that helps is every week a cast member gets cut. So that's one less person I have to deal with as we go through the book. It is a cooking competition. But it was important to me that they all had different voices, but they also had different dreams. And those dreams weren't necessarily what, was being portrayed on the screen, but hopefully getting to know more about the characters. And there were some characters that, because of revisions, don't get to know quite as well. And I don't know, maybe they'll have to get a story of their own in the future.
Well, when you're writing about a character that is that's outside of your own experience, how do you go about making sure that you're presenting an authentic character?
Part of it is just pray that you didn't screw up really bad. I'm not going to lie. You do your research, and I think if you go in with that intention that you are aware that you are trying to do the best you can, in some cases I kept things a little more general, so it wasn't getting too deep into a cultural background, because I risked, I didn't want to risk offending someone who might read it. But the other thing that I did in the book, and we addressed kind of early on, and not everyone's going to agree with the way I did it, and I understand that, but I hope that people realize it came from respect, is we did discuss that when you are cast on a reality show, you are cast as a character, and you are a stereotype in the eyes of the producer. And so figuring out what's real and not real is one of the challenges Peyton has to figure out. So that was, and just show respect to the culture. do your research.
My esteemed audience early in their reading says, well, now what's the deal here? There's a stereotype. Rest assured, esteemed audience, you are in good, capable hands with Shara Schmitt. She's gonna she's gonna pay it off.
I hope so. I hope that is how most people discover it, and I hope that they will give the characters a chance. It's a lot right at the beginning. It's 8 characters that are introduced, almost like dumping ice water over somebody's head for a couple of chapters. There's just so many of them, and you want to get that. I wanted to get that rapport between all of them started early. So.
And I know, of course, that you do the very fast first draft. Do you remember how long the fast first draft for this one took?
This was not as fast. This was not as fast because it was kind of like playing Tetris with the book, because there was a storyline, then there were the landmark challenges that are around New York, then there were challenges in the kitchen, and like trying to keep all of those in order and remember who was supposed to get eliminated when, and making sure that somebody who was eliminated didn't show up 4 chapters later. So it was definitely a challenge. I want to say this one probably took me about 2.5 to 3 months to get the draft, and then I would say probably a good year to get it to the place where I could send it to my editor and she could respond back with a very lengthy editorial note.